wasn't big, especially
I went ahead and became a computer hobbyist and started writing programs. And when the first Apple computer came out, I bought it. And unlike everybody else I know, that when they had those computers, they would buy software. I always wrote my own. And then when the first IBM came out in 1980, I sold my Apple, bought an IBM, and started writing in this language called Pascal. And started writing a financial program to do my family's finances. Now, people to this day asking me where I learned how to program the computer, and I tell them, Stanford. You know, it's the best of all worlds. I get to say that, and they don't hit me up for money. So I formed this company in my basement called Parsons Technology. And Parsons Technology, when I started it, all I wanted to do, my main goal, was just to have a successful business. And in my mind, a successful business back then was, I used to get these magazines, these big magazines with these big ads. There was a cool firm back then called Orchid Technology. Dell was then, Compact Computer, on and on and on. And my big dream was one day my company would have products that people loved and I'd have big ads right next to these guys. I didn't do it to make money. Now, athletes in sport, they play sports, and if they're good, they're successful because they're obsessed in winning. They don't worry about making money. Of course, they do make money, but it's the same thing with business. I believe if you work in your business and you're doing it because you want to do something better and right and better than anybody else, you have a real chance of being successful. If you're doing it just to turn a buck, you're dead. Forget it. And the reason is because the things you have to do to be successful and the sacrifices you have to make, you will never do that if it's just to make money. And also, one other thing, if you're just to make money, you'll have a lot more fear. You won't take the chances you need to take. And you won't look the dragon in the teeth like people do when they want to be successful for the sake of being successful. Well, with Parsons Technology, that's the way it was. When I started it, all the money I had in the world was $15,000. Now, $15,000. I remember I took and bought a couple small ads and did this, did that, named my company Parsons Technology, named the software Money Counts, tried selling it like everybody else was, $199, this, that, and the other thing, sold nothing, lost the whole $15,000. See ya. Next year, I got a bonus from my real job. I got some credit cards. saved some money, and took another run at it with 25 and a tax loss from the first year. So took a run at it with 25,000 and lost all of that. Dropped the software to 129 to 99 to 69, so forth. Now, one of the things I always did was I paid my bills. If I did business with them, I always paid them, and people never knew I was broke. So I was pretty responsible about that. The third year, I kept improving my software, and during the third year, I was so desperate that I was a buddy of mine named Dave. I said to him, Dave, I brought him into my office because at my real job, which was at a leasing company, and which I had started and I was CEO of, I wrote on the board exactly what I thought would happen. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll sell you half of this company for $5,000. Because I wanted to do some little marketing thing. And I mean, I was at my wit's end. And a guy said, let me think about it. And overnight, got back to me. Nah, I'm not interested. I'm not going to do it. Now, what I showed him on the board was exactly what happened. And what happened was I had a company call me. Well, this isn't exactly what I showed, but I had a company call me. My lucky break was a company out of Fort Dodge called Computer Bargain Line, called me and showed me a deal they had. Their magazine was called Computer Bargain Line, a real rag. And on the outside front cover, it normally went for $18,000. We're going to sell it to me for $5,000. Sell me that ad space. If I went ahead in 2 days or 3 days, got them the creative. So I said, absolutely, I'll do it. And I remember what I did was, I didn't have that was one time I didn't have the money. I went ahead, had the ad made. The headline said, money counts, but it only costs $12. Dropped the price to $12. And I said, back then it was copy protection, so many backups were limited, you know, this, that, you can't give it to anybody. I said, there's no copy protection. Take as many backups as you want. Make copies and give it to anybody you want. Do any goddamn thing you want, just send me $12. And the ad worked. It worked. I made about $15,000 on that ad. Never happened before. So then I went ahead and started buying ads in other magazines because I had good credit. That first year when I turned the corner, I made $287,000. The next year, I made $2.5 million. The next year, I made $5 million, and like that until 1994. Now, had I not hung in there, never would have happened. I was there when I had my lucky break, and I was able to take advantage of it, all right? And because I wasn't doing it for money, I was doing it to have big ads, which I did. Big ads are what made me money, not the little ads. It was funny, the things I dreamt about having were the key to Rebecca. That's what made it work. So in 1994, my then wife and I decided to sell the business, and because we seen the internet on the wall, we thought shrink wrap software was at the end, and you know, this, that, and the other thing. So Intuit approached us and offered me we decided that we would sell the business for $40 million. Intuit approached us and said, offered me $60 million. And I remember saying, you know, I didn't go to Harvard, but I knew well enough to tell them I was insulted. So I told them, you know, that we went back and forth. I finally sold it to him for $64 million. And I remember I was at a party after that, after the sale was done, and I ran into my buddy Dave. And I couldn't help it. I said to him, Dave, you remember that time I offered you half of this company for $5,000? He goes, oh, I think about it all the time. All right, so then what I did was, my wife and I, we partied, we did the divide by two. I took my money, went out to Arizona, and I moved there to play golf. She stayed in Iowa, Illinois there, and there you have it. And I started the company that became known as GoDaddy in Arizona. And GoDaddy, when I first started it, I had a lot of money and no ideas, very dangerous combination. So what I decided to do was I hired a bunch of intelligent people, and I would try everything in the internet because I knew it was the future, and we would settle on what worked. What I didn't know, it was very difficult to do that. So much easier to find stuff that don't work. So anyhow, we did that. We did all sorts of things. We did extranets, intranets, sold hardware, did education. The one thing that worked that we did was websites. We were building websites. But the problem with building websites, they didn't scale. You know, we got paid exactly based on how hard we worked, one for one. Now, the secret to being very rich, you got to get paid while you're sleeping and on vacation. That's how you make money. So we came up with the idea that we would do a website builder, which GoDaddy still sells today. It's in its 50th incarnation, I guess. And we debuted that in 1999, sold next to nothing because the dot-com boom was so loud. We couldn't even get people to sell us advertising. Couldn't get people to even talk to us. people were paying $500 a customer for an ad where the customer brought in either no revenue or $1. It was stupid. So what we did at that time, we noticed that every ad, the domain name, I mean every website, the ad that every website needed a domain name, and the domain name companies back then were terrible to deal with. And back then it was pretty much all .com, .net, .org. And so what we did was we decided that we would become a domain name registrar, and the customers who bought the domain names would come in and buy our software. That's how we get their attention. We would sell them the domain names cheap, and we'd be far less expensive. Prices were very high back then. Ours were like $8 for a domain name. Our service would be good. Other domain name companies had terrible service. Our systems would work. Nobody's system really worked good. Everything was so buggy back then. And the decision was right as rain. So we launched onto that, and after about $1 million in a year, we were able to sell our first domain name in November 2000. The domain name was bought, I don't even know what it meant. It was ghettojustice.com.